Do you know what? I did
Yeah.
not know that.
In fact, my old condo where I used to live was about half a mile from the original pharmacy where they Dr. Pemberton sold Coca-Cola. So it's a whole,
Ah.
yeah, really
You
cool
we
thing.
look forward to going into this. So, welcome
Yes.
to the Ultimate Sync Sessions. We are joined by two amazing music supervisors. So, I am the host for today. So, I'm Amelia McCloskey. I am CEO of Ultimate Sync Access and also AIM licensing, and also do some music supervision myself as well. But joined by two fantastic ladies who work in the field of music supervision. We're joined by Sam. So, Sam, if you want to introduce yourself first, briefly, quickly.
Sure. I'm Sam Parvin, and I am a music supervisor for brands and have a music agency where we compose music as well. I've been working in the music space for my whole career. I started at a recording studio in Atlanta, Georgia, and worked for the Coca-Cola company for several years, managing all their music assets and making music and choosing what music would go in their ads globally for several of the brands across the globe. And started my business about 7 years ago, helping other brands use music effectively in their campaigns.
Amazing. And we are also joined by Lilah. And Lilah's got an amazing surname, which I'm going to have her pronounce because we've been back and forth with this, who is also Latin American roots. So if you would like to introduce yourself, Lilah.
So it's Lilah Obregon-Wilson. And it's we talked about it. It's not an easy
Yes.
name, but and it's a bad general with history in Mexico. So if we ever look at that, he loses his arm, so that's good. Um, but he was with Diaz. It's a whole thing. But I actually don't think it's my family's real name. They were revolutionaries at Pancho Villa, and I think when they came back to register, they took the name because he was part of the winning party. But it's my mom's surname and it's my protest. It's Wilson. I had nothing against England or whatnot, and I'm Irish Scottish on that side. Another political side of that because they were brought to Ireland to wipe out Catholics, basically. But I
Well,
always say my dad married a Catholic, and that's what was how he did it. But that's the Wilson. But it's my protest in the States, so to speak, to say that I am of mixed blood and have a strong history and tied to Mexico because it's often not discussed, and it's a very important part of our
mm.
background, basically, here and how we're made. But as far as music and that, I got into this. I didn't study it. I kind of fell into music supervision via opening up a venue, which I know we'll discuss later, in Williamsburg,
Mm.
Brooklyn. And that the way I opened it kind of pushed me into this job, and that was on the advertising side. So I started on that side and on the music house side, and then eventually went in agency at J. Walter Thompson, and I ran their department. And then when as things deflate as they do in the corporate world, went out on my own, and that started the film side of it. But
Nice.
it's through that venue that I basically it's through passion and then that venue that pushed me and escalated me into this craft.
So we're going to have a whole wealth of amazing information from both of you and advice for everyone that listens to this. Feel very lucky to be, alongside such great experience in the supervision world. So let's go delve into your background a little bit more, Lilah. First of all, can you share like what it was like? Because you grew up in LA, right?
Yeah.
So, can you discuss what the musical influences were like for you growing up? What kind of artists did you listen to? And, where were your hangout spots? And how did that kind of influence you to eventually move into the supervision world?
um I think okay, so it influenced me by installing roots of music and keeping that near to me. But so it starts with my dad, who's actually from Michigan. my mom is from Mexico. My dad is the lover of music and used to bring it home, and the dancer. He loved dance back when. So he came from a doo-wop and soul scene, uh, rock and roll, R&B rock and rolls, because you can dance to it. Classic rock kind of just fell somewhere, I don't know where, but not in our household. And then it went straight to disco and then beyond. So it's anything you could dance to. And he made sure we danced all the time. And I was in dance class from like 4 till 14,
Wow.
where I had just to pivot to softball because that's what was going to pay for my college, to sport. And in California, you have to decide on what you do and commit. So that being said, though, the dance, which is interesting, and I didn't realize this till later, but we went from tutus to modern dance wear like within 2 years. And the Lakers, and studying more about the Lakers, and that TV series that came out by the Dynasty, and knowing more about Paula Abdul, and there's J-Lo, and there's different TV shows and MTV that started to pop up that started to make this modern dance world, going into like, obviously hip hop was always around, but not always visual. MTV didn't put MTV Raps till later, but breakdancing was earlier on. So the idea of street dancing was there, and that kind of still goes on to where my dad's roots is from, because shaking your hips and doing all that was not allowed, obviously. So that's like the counterculture of dance. So anyways, that music is instilled. He hated sports. I played sports all my life. My mom knew that it would get me to college if I played well. I didn't come from, one was a maid and one's a pool man, so they couldn't afford school. So my mom was more, first generation immigrant. She's like, you're going to be professional, you need to go to school, that's it. But her rule was grades are good, do whatever you want. Dad's rules were no rules, so there's no filters. So, and since he hated sports, he encouraged any dance thing that I did. So first we have quinceañeras, as far as culturally installed, and that's like sweet 15, sweet 16s, right? But we had backyard parties all the time because that's what Latinos do. And I just read a great article about the disco scene in East LA. As I got old enough, actually not old enough. This is Six Flags Magic Mountain used to have an after hours club, and they didn't serve alcohol. So if you were there, you went, and we would just tell our parents. I lived right by Six Flags, so it's like a babysitter. And I know like Atlanta has, you guys, Georgia. Yeah. So
it's like, I don't know if they have them in the UK, but it's a theme park where they have roller coaster stuff.
We have like what's called Alton Towers in Chessington, but it's probably nothing like how the Americans do it.
Well, what happened?
Not California big, I'm sure.
Yeah.
What happened with Six Flags is it was magic. It was different amusement parks, and Six Flags is a company that came in and kind of usurped all of them and named them all the same. So as they became a brand, and they're all over the states, you'll see a Six Flags. But if you see the third kind of name afterwards, that's usually what it was before, if it was what. But that, and Bailey's used to own it. It's like really weird. So, but they had an after hours, and we just tell our family, yeah, just pick us up at 2:00, and we were there as 7th and 8th. So we were like 11 and 12 out dancing.
2 a.m. I love
school. And my friend in softball, like her my grades were good, so I'm the good kid. So she's like, they're like, she's good, we're all good. They're out, whatever. They're riding rides late. So they would pick us up. My mom would always make a point. And then when I got to drive, then I got to go to clubs, and the club would usually every Friday night would be one in Hollywood. And then East LA was a scene of ditch parties organizers. Actually, the inner city schools were so bad that in East LA is a Latino area, that they started to protest this kind of going to school basically, and through ditch parties. But what they would do would organize parties on the weekend, which turned into bigger sort of raves, and they would make money off of it. And these were where I found basically my people, because where I went to school, there was a very small, we were 4,000 in the high school, but very small population of Chicanos is what we are. we were all deemed gangsters. So this is during the 90s. So if
Oh.
you think of the riots in the 90s and the gang scenes, and even like with music, gangster rap and that, we were just deemed that. So it's cool to be the scary kids in school in some ways, but it's not what you're into. And my favorite band was The Cure. And if you look up,
Okay.
yeah, the Chicano culture, there's a Morrissey attachment to a lot of our men. So that scene in East LA talked to it, because those schools were filled with Latinos and Chicanos, but then the groups in between, the jocks, the stoners, that were all Latinos. So you didn't have this division of people. And so going to these parties, that's where actually disco cha-cha comes from, because cha-chas were the girls that would go out and dance. We were not cholas or gangbangers. And then the rebels were the guys, and they would dress up as like they look like Morrissey, like little like rockabillys. But the music would usually be kind of this, there was K-Rock, a radio station that was pirate station that started off that would be like The Cure and Joy Division and all that. So it'd be that. Go. There's a really goth emo scene within the Chicano. So it'd just be this whole flex of music. And that was every weekend. Without, and I didn't have a curfew, so I would take this
That's
big
so
car
cool.
and fill people up with it, and and then go to the parties, and then drive them home, and then continued on. So that's way a lot of information, but that's how the influence of music, I guess, stayed with me. Like that's then later on, when I made my decisions, that's why.
That sounds super fun though. Super fun. I grew up in a country, so we had a lot of free parties where we would find out about the rave about an hour before, and then you just turn up there like in the middle of a random forest, and then there would be like hundreds of people in the middle of the forest before the police would come and shut it down. But being out in the country, in the sticks, as we say, we'd have part-time police stations, so they would be able to go on all night because they'd never be able to hear about it because they were so far away. So that's the joy of living out in the countryside. So Sam, what about you? Because you're from Atlanta, so what was it like growing up for you? Because that's also like a massive music hub, music scene. So yeah, interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I mean, music had a big influence on me. I would say, I mean, my parents are both big music lovers, but for sure my mom was the one who was kind of pushing, or just like she has really good taste even to this day as she discovers new artists, she'll listen to plenty of music, but then she'll find an artist that she loves, and the artists she loves, I think, are kind of like ubiquitously known as like good artists, so like she has this good ear. But I mean, growing up, my parents were hippies. Like they graduated high school in 1971, and so we're like right there at the at the age of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all of that. So I listened to a lot of that growing up. But then, I mean, really, my mom, her taste evolved, and so we also had dance parties as a kid, for sure. I grew up in a neighborhood with my parents always had a lot of friends, and they had kids who were all our friends. So there was always a lot of like getting together. We had a little lake in the neighborhood and stuff, and there was always music there. Always dancing. I also danced from the time I was 3 years old till I graduated high school. I think that had a lot to do with me and music as well. And living in Atlanta too, yeah, I mean, I started going to shows. Like the first show I went to was Bonnie Raitt and Lyle Lovett at a place called Lakewood Amphitheater, which is this amazing amphitheater in the south side of Atlanta. But I was like 7 years old, and
Wow.
but my parents took me, and they were big concert goers. And then we had Music Midtown, which was an iconic music festival, which they have now again. They took probably a decade off and now are doing them again. But I remember going to Music Midtown, and I saw 98 Degrees and Jessica Simpson in a
I
tent,
remember 98 Degrees.
in like a super like sweaty tent, and they were giving away Jessica Simpson's cassette tape for free, just like, please, people, listen to this. They're trying to get around, I saw like Kid Rock there. I remember being in the middle of like there was a mosh pit on this side and a mosh pit on this side, and I was in the middle. And at that point, I was probably 12 and would go out, but like my parents went, and my sister and my friends and I would go, and we would just have like a meetup spot for later, and so everybody would go see the shows that they wanted to. And I mean, these were 10,000 person concert or festivals that I was going to as a middle schooler. So
Pretty cool.
and Atlanta, just talking about Atlanta or even Georgia, let's say, Ray Charles, like we had a whole like soul, part of Atlanta, and like black talent, like Ray Charles and Gladys Knight. And then we have an amazing rock scene to this day. We have some kick-ass great venues that have been around, like that they're still in Atlanta that have been around. But REM got there, became huge and lived in Athens, called Athens their home for 40 years. And the Indigo Girls are from Decatur, the same little place that I'm from. And then of course the hip hop scene has been a huge huge influence for me, because hip hop became big during my generation. I mean, I was growing up in the 90s and 2000s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And so Outkast was like a huge artist for me. Usher, TLC, Whitney Houston lived in Atlanta for 30 years. And then the recording studio I later kind of started my music career at, we recorded a lot of those albums.
Nice.
And those artists, and seeing the platinum records on the wall and stuff. Some of the talent was there when I was there. We worked with T.I. and a bunch of those guys in Outkast. Metallica we recorded, but a lot of them were ones that were before my time, and just seeing their records on the walls was just like, wow. So yeah, I mean, music has been from just even within my family something important. But then also, yeah, living in Atlanta and having access to getting to go to all these shows was just like a dream. And my parents they certainly were a little more not so lenient on me, but they were understanding about going to concerts, and that was cool. And when I got my driver's license, yeah, that really opened me up to getting to go to a lot of shows. It was cool.
And so just want to revert back to Lilah, because we mentioned about venues, and LA, you have like the Whiskey Go-Go and the Vibe Room and like all these iconic places. So I imagine, Lilah, like for you going to a lot of these gigs and stuff, did you find yourself like attending a lot of these iconic venues as well?
No, and I'm not going to say it in the non-PC way, but no, they yeah. This is in growing up, a certain group went one way and another group went another. Yeah. So the Viper Room, I was already in college when we had the Viper Room started to have a lot of the bands that were more, I guess, integrated with what I was listening to. But when I was already going into school, when we had the big accident when the there, and they're small venues, those places. I've been to them after the fact,
right?
A lot of different bands, but generally, so Friday nights, I can tell you, was a place called the Arena.
Okay.
And it's actually Madonna shot a video there back when, a while ago, but it was the Arena. If you bring it up to people back then, the back when, they'll say, oh, that's where certain kids went. And I don't know what that meant, but it was a gay night and it was under 18. So, but if you looked cute enough, you can get let in if you were 16. So the first time I did go in, there was no alcohol because it was under 18. That's one. And I didn't notice till somebody pointed out afterwards. And then Monday nights there was a club behind it, and they would have Sweet Sundays when you would have Mondays off. Well, when you had Mondays off, you could go to Sweet Sundays.
Okay.
And that night. So But my mom said that my dad used to follow me sometimes. And I was like, did he ever go in? And because he used to go to these places when he was younger. And the first night at the arena, when I walked in, there was a guy with nothing but duct tape around his parts. So I was just like, oh God, did dad go in? And nothing was ever said.
Oh,
But then it's like LA has like the other iconic non so small gig is like Hollywood Bowl. So my first show was Shauna Na when I was 4 at Hollywood Bowl. Or you had Dodger Stadium. I saw my dad took us to see the Jackson 5. We just lost Tito, but saw the Jackson 5 when I was about. And my first one, and I don't know where it was. It was, I think it's in Pasadena somewhere, but it was where he dropped us off as the Fat Boys tour, and Ice-T and Salt and Pepper opened up, and then I also De La Soul and Big Daddy Kane in a theater where I remember also going with my school seeing a play. So I can't tell you and remember, but one thing I always felt growing up, because LA is a bit of a suburban divided area, is that you had more of the like raves in weird warehouses, or the backyard parties were more accessible than and in I'll pocket it out, because even like the punk scene, there's 2 different punk scenes. Then moving to New York, where it was, we talk about iconic venues, I ran to CBGB's, like ran there as soon as I could to see it. So I think New York actually gave me more accessibility to that. And I also, that my broader sense of music started to open up by people I met, because I was kind of involved more in a DJ scene in LA because of it being clubbed. But I did see those bands. I did see The Cure, but it was a massive stadium. And
of course,
wasn't that they played a smaller place, and I was like, what, and it was just like, yeah. So that is how it's different. And we also, like, every Friday night before the arena, you'd have cruising until they made it illegal. So you had lowriders, and and if you knew a car club, you'd go into the car, you cruise with them, and it was all like Chicano soul music, like, which is the same with my dad listened to. And Art LaBelle was huge. And Art LaBelle started way back before Richie Valens and sorts with the radio scene. But he got coined as like this, this person of Chicano music, and like people from jail would write out dedications and stuff like that. So you would go and you'd cruise Friday night and Sundays, and you cruise, and sometimes you'd have Art LaBelle playing, or you play songs from his radio mixes. So it's like, it was a different way of accessing music, but kind of, I felt lucky because my dad was open to me going these places, and I think opened my mind to doing that because the way he did it. Otherwise, and my grandfather apparently was a jazz musician. He used to book clubs, but I didn't know till college. I thought he was a used car salesman.
Quite
yeah,
different.
It was, but I didn't know anything about the jazz and part of it, and I don't know why, but it's other parent, like, relationship things. But it's I'm glad, because if I talk to other people that I went to school with, or they didn't have the exact same experience, so to speak. The kids in the areas did where I went to, but I had to travel out to these places. Like,
I mean, LA is so sprawling, isn't it?
Like, yeah, and you usually
travel to get anywhere.
Yeah, and you usually didn't. You stayed in your areas and everything. But I went to I went to two high school parties in my lifetime, and they were both softball related. So they had to do with my team. I don't remember anything else to do with my high school except for some football nights on Friday nights. Some if I wasn't out, and that was it. So yeah.
You mentioned about New York. You opened the Lucky Cat, right? So let's delve into this side of things, because that was a major moment for you. So yeah, let's hear a bit about that.
So I think with music and being exposed to music, and you talk about your raves out about I got the softball scholarship to St. John's, and all of them, we didn't have dorms, so they're probably athletes together, and most of them are jocks, let's say, like that. But the English guys on the soccer team or football team, they were used to doing what you did. So they were
Yeah.
the ones that were up for going to the clubs in New York. And we still had Peter Gation doing his thing then, who he got done after the Michael Alec murder, and
Mm.
his clubs all shut down, but it was like Limelight and the Tunnel, and it was still a bit seedier. But I had all that, and then I started going to gigs and shows and like free shows in Central Park, and so that started opening up things. But what I did is that after school, I studied psychology and history and went crap, didn't do anything that makes you any money. And psychology was like I wasn't to my dean wouldn't meet with the athletes on our time after practice, and no idea what to do with it. Then I was like, law school, I'll get in, go in, get out, be rich, yay. And I'll do exactly what my mom said to do. I went in and I went toward human rights and immigration. That if you want to help people, you do not make money. I had the school loan as well, and I looked at my law school loan and I said, crap, how do I make X amount of money and pay this? And my dad always wanted never to put pressure on us, and we grew up and he said, do whatever you want. And obviously that sounds, right on par with what I was doing. So I was like, all right, let's see, let's figure this out. And then I had gone to Vienna and discovered the coffee houses there, which are like coffee houses in LA. And I didn't know why we had more in LA, but it was because of AA, which is Alcoholics Anonymous, which
Mm.
makes sense. And they were open till at the same time as bars till 2 a.m. And I used to go to those. So, and then my business partner at the time, like New Orleans. So we decided to do this coffee house kind of idea where we have coffee in all ages, and we opened a venue in Williamsburg, Brooklyn during a DIY time. And it's like, meet me in the bathroom. There's a documentary right before us, the yeah and the Strokes and everything. But right during that element. So in 2002, I was like, let's open up a venue. And she said, okay. And we got a place and we kind of built it out. It was initially supposed to be mainly DJs. And on the first day, Aaron Buchanan again, I remember. Aaron, he came in and he played with Matis Yahoo, but he was an anti-folk scene, kind of a twee scene because that was the music also. Then he was like, can I play here? And I was like, where? And he's like, right there in the corner. And I was like, oh, okay. And then by default, that area just exploded with like bands needing places to play, and venues just the DIY just turned everything into kind of a platform. And you see that in that film. But again, right before that, I was going to Lux, which had Larry T and the too many DJs, and Berliniansburg, and still kind of a DJ culture, even though it was bands doing the sound and everything. So we thought that was what it was going to be. So I did that, and we did it on credit card money.
Wow.
Yeah, but our rent was also $2,400 a month, I believe. You guys do the weeks, right? Because the flats are by the week or whatnot. It was that block within the years I was there went up to $15,000 a month for a space.
That's
yes.
insane.
Yeah, so it showed you, but we did build it out. Like I mosaicked it. We did it our own. I had a handyman because I lived in this big warehouse that we did the same for cheap rent. And that was kind of the story there, though. So you met people and did everything in that way. So that did that.
That's really cool. And how long did you do that for?
Well, I opened up illegally in 2002, and I split my partnership kind of for 2004 or so, and I was running it on my own. And in 2009, I decided to sell it. You shouldn't do anything on credit card money, for one. and it's just I didn't plan on like opening another place. And when I met my community of, say, bar owners, restaurant owners, the whole Williamsburg and whatnot, and also then meeting my buyers, I found out that's what you really would do. If you're in that world, you open up another one, then you have another space, and then you maybe change another space to another name, and that's the world you're in. And that's definitely what I didn't want to do for the rest of my life. So then, I decided to sell it, and I sold it with the intention of it keeping to what it's supposed to be for indie music. It kind of did. And that's where publicly I can't say too much.
Yeah, of course.
I
What a
I
great
still lived right
achievement,
next
though.
door. Yeah, I lived next door to it for, I think, I don't know, actually 09, probably 8 years or 7 years of the newer, what I sold it to.
Mm.
So
And how old were you when you do that? Were you quite young still, like when you set that up? And
I was 23.
yeah, that's so
Yeah.
young to buy and like to set up a business and sell it like years later. That's super cool.
I graduated, like when you graduate, so uni, you can do law school in England starting in uni 4 years, and so here it's 4 years and you do 3 years more. So it's 18. Oh no, I wasn't 22 because I was 22 when I graduated, so I had to be 26. So yeah, let's put some years on that. 23. So 23 graduated in like 26. So still young though.
Yeah.
But I think right when I started law school, I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer. So maybe that's why 22 sits in my head. I was trying to figure out every way out and knowing I had to finish it though. But yeah, I did. My dad had a pool store, and he was pool man, and he had a pool store. My grandmother in Mexico had a store. My grandfather in Mexico is a blacksmith. My mom was a maid, kind of did her own kind of business, had her clients, right? And then grandfather, the used car salesman, that was the jazz person, and it sounds like a hustle. Somebody had to point out to me later, you seem to have come from a lineage, and it's the risk taking, and that's what I realize now.
The credit card money. Your
Credit
business, you got to take risks.
How to dodge your debt collectors. Yeah, no, that was dad's lesson. But or I learned how to avoid them before that happened. But it was cool during like the explosive scene there. Kind of allowed it, and it was affordable. Like we had cheaper rents, and we could do that, and we could like create and recreate spaces. There's a place called Rubula, and you talk about the part-time police, but they set up shop next to, when they had to move, next to Hasidics, and they would set their parties on Friday nights so that they wouldn't use the phone to call the cops on them. Because of Shabbat, it's like
I love that.
You did things you like, and if your whole community is doing it, it's like cool. You learn tricks and you share resources, and like everything becomes affordable. Like my liquor license, the guy who did it, that's usually the story in New York. Like, oh, it costs so much, and I went down to another bar or a restaurant. I go, hey, who did this for you? And they gave me names, and then that guy ended up giving me my plumbing person that I needed, and the guy that owned that recommend owns like this massive is this place, a Thai place in Williamsburg that people know. He owns a few places. It was like his dudes, and he's Korean, and then like the plumbers are Chinese, and like my architect was in Chinatown, and it was just like everybody just kind of hustled in this, and in true New York kind of mafioso, I think, way.
Yeah.
But we were legit. It was legit, but it was but that's what's cool. And now, like, opening something like that, or even a few years after I did it, is daunting. That you need investment. You need investors.
Yeah. It's so expensive for rents now in the
and it's everywhere, right? It's like everywhere.
Everything else, insurance, and I mean, you're supposed to like do everything the right way, and which is very expensive.
Yeah.
The kind of communal thing that you're talking about certainly isn't as prominent now.
No, and then Georgia is a huge the music scene you're talking about. Like that's like they like survived off of the idea of the singles and records and who performed and recorded. It's like these were small little setups of studios that did it. And it's just like it's sad because it's worldwide problem. It's not like, yeah.
So Sam, like your experience at the studio and having worked at a place with such an iconic artist recording and everything, like how do you find that really shaped your career in supervision, and what kind of experiences that you had there did you draw on moving into your supervision side of things?
Good question. Like, I mean, I see now in retrospect that that's where it all started. I mean, when I went to school, I kind of already knew, um, going into college, I was looking for a program where I could learn about the business side of music. You know, the music business programs didn't really exist in schools then, so I found something that was close enough, you know. But at that time, I kind of thought that I would do live events because that's what I was most familiar with. I'd plan, you know, festivals and music festivals and stuff. Um, but when I got the gig at the recording studio, it showed me, of course, the whole recording side of the art. And we did a lot of music or a lot of work there for film and advertising. We did, and our day clients, you know, I worked during the day. I worked normal, like 9 to 6 hours. And our night clients were the hip hop talent and stuff like that. And our day clients were a lot of the advertising agencies and we recorded audiobooks with Jimmy Carter, former president, and we did a lot of audio for TV shows, movies, because that's right when the movie industry started coming to Georgia. Um, Radio ads and all of that. So my clients, the people who I really got to know well, were the ones who came during the day, and they were on that side of things, like advertising and stuff. And I remember thinking, you know, back then I was a real go-getter, and I knew like I wasn't going to stay at the studio forever. Um, and I remember thinking like, what if I could bring together the worlds of music with brands, and I could, you know, because the music that's in most advertising that we see is total shit. And like, what if I could help get artists paid and like do really cool things and put like real music and not just like jingles or like, you know, library stuff in advertising. And I had that thought and I didn't even remember it until many years later. You know how they talk about like the world of manifestation and stuff. And it's like, you know, create this real vivid vision and get clear on what it is that you want and then let it go, you know, and just like trust that it's going to come in divine time and or this is what I, you know, believe, or whether you believe it or not, like, I think a lot of things happen like this in life, you know? So it was like, I had this kind of realization while I was there when I was seeing the advertising side of things and also the music side of things. And, years later I would get the opportunity to do just that, you know. So certainly the studio helped me, you know, help shape that. And when I was there, I mean, I was doing all the I was doing all the business side of things. I was scheduling things. I was calling Sony and all these record labels and hitting them up for the money that they've owed us for a really long time for artists. And I was doing a lot of the admin and kind of business side of things, but I hung out in the studios as much as I could, you know. We had a staff of 7 full-time audio engineers, and they all kind of had their own different ways that they did things or specialties, and clients that were, you know, had their favorite engineer and would call and say, "Oh, is this guy, you know, available for my session?" And I really tried to spend as much time as I could in the studios, and just see what that was like, both for the music piece of it and the advertising stuff, which I didn't know I was interested in until I saw it, you know? So, the other thing I'd say about that is I didn't even know I was a music supervisor until just the last few years. I was like, "Oh, I'm a music supervisor," because I got hired, you know, like I went to like solve problems around music, and one of those problems, you know, problems around music that I was solving was music supervision. I mean, the role of music supervision as far as like negotiating deals, structuring deals, finding out what kind of intellectual property rights we need, knowing who the, you know, rights holders are for music, of course, choosing music, you know, thinking about like what route should we go, you know, should we license an existing song from emerging talent, should we compose something original, all of that stuff I was doing for the Coca-Cola company. But I was also doing a bunch of other stuff at Coke, and I didn't even know what a music supervisor was until literally my dear friend who you also know, Amelia Patricia
Love
Carrera,
Patty.
who's a Mexican music supervisor. She came to one of my events. I had a 1-year anniversary event of my business opening in Latin America, and she came. Somebody invited her. I didn't invite her because I didn't even know her, and she came and she was like, "Oh my God, I love this! I love you!" And then she started telling me that, like, just like referring to me as a music supervisor, and then I was like, "Oh, what is that?" And to your point, Lila, I think very few supervisors until maybe the last 4 years or something actually came into music supervision as like, I'm going to study music supervision in college. I'm going to learn how to be a music supervisor, and then I'm going to do that job. And I think this is one of the things that makes us so special as people, is like, we all got into it from a different route, and mostly our routes were like this,
Yeah.
but you talk to some supervisors and they're extremely organized, and just they come at it from this kind of project management side, or IP law side, or sometimes you come in, you talk to them and they were like musicians, so they come at it from this kind of more artistic side. And so it's really interesting just to hear different people's routes that they come in. But anyway, now I realize I am a music supervisor. I do some other things too, but that was kind of the route of discovery, knowing that I wanted to work in music, and knowing that also, I mean, for me, I think the biggest thing was just, I was like, I want to get artists paid. Like, I was always fascinated. This is why I went into the business side of music in the first place, was like, when I was in high school, and you start thinking about what you might want to be when you grow up. And I loved music, and people would talk about the artists getting rich and famous. And I watched John Mayer. I was a big fan of John Mayer when I was a teenager, and still am. But he was living in Atlanta at the time, and that was kind of when he got his break. And I watched him. I would go see him play at venues that held 300 people, and there were like 60 people there. And then to be John Mayer, who's playing at the Sphere, now in Vegas every night. But I was just like, how does that happen? How do people make money off their music? And so that was a big piece of it. And when I was thinking about bringing musicians together with brands, it was like, oh, this is a way for artists to get heard and also get paid. It's a real value for value, symbiotic relationship. Yeah.
And what was your first project that you worked on, your first supervision project, not knowing it was that you were supervising?
Oh my gosh, I had no idea. No one's ever asked me this. I haven't even thought about that. What was the first project? Well, it would have been something with Coca-Cola for sure.
Wow. I mean, having Coca-Cola, let's just like put that out there a minute. Having Coca-Cola is your first client.
It's my first.
Like, wow,
Yeah,
how many
I
people
know.
say that? Seriously.
It was a wild whirlwind, I think so often about, and I remind myself of this still with just like the life things that we go through. It's like, your life can change in an instant, but you've been preparing for that for years, so it's like, I really did. I mean, I got recruited by a company that brought me into Coke. I didn't even know. I thought I went through it. My first interview was on a Sunday. I signed my job contract on January 1st. Nobody's working on January 1st. And I'm like literally signing the contract, and I was like, great, so am I moving to Chicago? And they're like, no, you're going to be in Atlanta, working in the Coke headquarters, like in Atlanta, because I worked for a third-party company based out of Chicago. But they hired me to manage to do the Coke work. So I had an office in the in the Atlanta headquarters of Coca-Cola, and that's where I worked every day. And I lived, I didn't ever live in Chicago or work in the offices of this other company. And I didn't even realize that was going to happen. But anyway, my first project, this sounds so funny too, now that you mentioned it, but when I came into Coke, I already had, there were a couple other colleagues who were kind of working on the Coke music project. And the first project that we did was their partnership with Spotify, because at that time, Spotify was in like 3 countries, and they had this very, ambitious goal to become worldwide, to be the streaming platform worldwide Spotify wanted to be, and they weren't, and they knew that the Coca-Cola company could help them do that. So Coke actually invested in them, invested in that, and they had kind of a partnership and invested in them. And so we dreamed up this idea of doing a campaign that we called the 52 Songs of Happiness. This was the very first project I did. 52 Songs of Happiness. And it was all with independent musicians from all over the world. And the idea was that we kind of sourced songs from all of these artists. We gave them a brief, kind of a general brief, and they wrote music about happiness and life, and, just kind of very on brand for Coke. And we chose, out of like hundreds of artists who just made a song for Coke, we chose 52 of these songs, and we launched one every week on the Spotify platform. And I don't remember how that exactly, tied into them launching in new markets, but that was what we were doing. We were launching these songs on Spotify in partnership between Coke and Spotify, in congruence with Spotify launching in new markets.
That's really cool. And
yeah, it was cool.
How did the campaign go? How did the launch go?
This comes into something that I would love to talk more about, and it's something I feel like strongly about, but it's like data and research and measurement of the success of campaigns, or the success of campaigns and the impact of campaigns, because those might be two different things, and always with these big companies, there's kind of an internal success, and then there's the success you can see with consumers, right? It's hard for me to remember. This was 11 years ago. But I will say, Spotify's huge now.
Saying it lightly.
Some of the artists really did get they got to do some pretty amazing things. I remember a guy, Jonas Willie, he was out of Atlanta. I knew him. I had met him personally because he lived in Atlanta. So he's just one that happens to come to mind, but he did some pretty great touring, was able to say that he had worked with Coke. All of these people made, some revenue off of streaming, and of course we paid them as well. It was also part of an initiative that we had for Coke to fully or partially own music assets as well. So to have them grow, their asset pool, which of course, if they're buying assets, I think at that time it was actually right when sync agencies were becoming a thing, we're launching. Actually, the company that I worked for was called Music Dealers, and we were, I believe, kind of the first sync agency before for independent musicians, but anyway, people would be like, artists need to own their own music. You need to own your own music. It's like, well, yeah, but if you're getting of course they're always going to own their authorship rights. And I'm just a huge advocate for talking through with artists, what everything means, and not making decisions for them, because sometimes, sharing in the rights with a company like the Coca-Cola company, for one, they're going to pay you more because you're giving them some rights, and for two, there could be some really synergistic, reasons for doing that, or it could be okay. It could be okay to give away some of your rights, but it's not a black or white thing, yes or no. And I think that that's something that I say as music supervisors, as part of our role, while of course we work for our clients, the ones who pay us, we are advocates for musicians and the music industry. And I think we have a really powerful role in being able to bring value to music, or to value music, monetarily and through other means. So anyway, not to get too far off, but I would just say that project was, I would say it was a small success, and kind of an opening for new ways that brands could be doing things. We created 52 new pieces of music. Actually, we created way more than that, but for the project, we chose 52 songs that were co-owned between these independent musicians who never, sorry, but never would have gotten the chance to work with a Coca-Cola company, you know, and yeah, now they have this kind of partnership and shared asset with them. So
that's really cool. Yeah. And it's true. I think artists can get, I mean, even in my own experience, I started out as an artist, first of all. And I remember getting, I also wrote my own songs. So I remember getting an offer maybe when I was about 17. I signed my first publishing deal from Universal. And I didn't sign it at the time because I was like, oh, I think they wanted to take all my rights and I wouldn't be credited for it. And I was like, no, you're not doing that to me. But you know what? I never did anything with the song. So I'm like, sometimes I feel, and with artists, you know, being creatives and things, can sometimes be a little bit too overprotective rather than looking at the bigger picture as to where giving up some of shared ownership, where it can take them. Or like in my case, can end up, you know, 0% of nothing is nothing. So you can end up doing nothing with it.
Well, it's just like, what are your goals? You know, what are your goals? If you want to be, if you're really, you know, I mean, if it's the jewel of the song that you've written that you think is the hit and you want to be a big talent and stuff, maybe selling it off to somebody who's never going to give you credit for it, maybe you don't want to do that unless they're going to pay you $100,000, and then maybe you just take that $100,000 and you write other songs and you hire whatever. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think you just gotta be, you know, clear about what your goals are, and sometimes, yeah, we're very precious about our art, you know. That's an interesting thing about working in, you know, when you're making art for somebody else, you know, for somebody who's not just you. And I think those things are very different to like write songs and record an album and release it for your as yourself and who you are versus making music for a brand. They're just very different things, you know.
Yeah. So Lilah, you've worked over like 30 different projects in films, and one of them being a Sundance winner, Sleepwalk with Me. Is that winner, nominated? Winner, I think. And you're also really passionate about documentaries that have a focus on immigration. Is that right? Should we delve into that a little bit about how you first got started into that side of things in the supervision film?
Sure. I'll also Sam, I think we were called music producers when we started.
Yeah, I'd say so.
That's right. So music supervisors, and I'm actually kind of like about them teaching it in school because one, we can't make a living off of it as of now, and I don't think that's fair. But I just wanted to touch on that. There was music supervision became when the sync world got more bigger in the film world.
Okay.
That's where that name kind of cross platforms, but and there's a lot of music supervisors that you'll meet in the film world that do not want to clear music whatsoever. And it's a weird thing for me being in both worlds, being that we do it in film and in advertising, and we have to do that and protect rights. And it's like, okay, how are we protecting our craft then if we're not expanding it? But that's a whole other thing, and it can start fires because it has. But as far as so with me with films, so with advertising, I did the same. I went from what we were called music houses. We stepped away from jingle houses because a lot of ad creatives were like, we want real bands. We don't want jingles. We want real bands creating our stuff. And we were like, but who do you think writes your music as a jingle? Like, hello, they're musicians. And one example I love using is Foster the People. Foster used to work at a music house before getting his big hit with Pumped Up Kicks. So I went from basically being A&R in my bar with everybody, all these musicians owning their own things. Daptone was really big. Sharon was too big, but the Budos played there all the time, and I had all of their things. But the Daptone label, I think, is a great example. Antibiotics guys were there too, and they're very, very selective. They record and then shop their stuff. But I think Daptone is a great example of a successful label that did it on their own, owning their stuff, rights, and I shouldn't say stuff, rights, and in getting it out to people on not on a huge major label system. And that was the turnaround that time. It was DIY everything, right? So I went into the because I needed not to the credit card money, went to advertising. And then when I sold the place, went into the agency, I went in pitching Microsoft Bing, and then we won it. And then I stayed on. They asked me to stay on, and 6 months later, they asked me to run it because the head of our post facility there was moving on, who supposedly was the lead, but honestly didn't have enough time. So our department was doing all the music in his name, and he put me there then, as agencies do, like as they lose clients. And to be honest, Jay Walter is no more. They are the original Mad Men. They come from Sir Charles, I think it is, from England even. They're because of the digital platforms. And even with Microsoft, we launched Bing, we use digital companies, and everybody's like, we don't do digital, we don't do internet, we're just, traditional broadcast, we don't, and they wouldn't touch it, which is the part of I feel part of the downfall of the understanding of where we were going, and also a lack of where they could have protected their assets. So because of the lack of understanding. So then as it went, and so in 2011, I was there for a short time, and it was the only time I was ever on the books as a corporate job. I then Anthony Roman, who's the lead singer of Radio 4 and one of our lead writers, and Radio 4 was on DFA before they went to EMI. He also booked the Lucky Cat at times for some bands, and then I had his whole band actually working there as employees. All my staff were, I think all but one were in a band of some sort. And then, or we had a rotation, whoever went on tour, then there was other ones, but there's always on hand about, I think, 13 or so employees. And it was the same thing. I was learning about them, about their rights, wanting to get them paid, hearing their stories. And I graduated law school doing human rights and immigration work. And I did asylum cases. I did asylum appeals. I mean, these were like serious cases where people's lives were in question. Wow. So going to the agency world, I at the time, Liberia was a big thing, but I worked with the UN, the International Human Rights Committee of Reporting, and that was when Fujimori left. It was like all kinds but the appeal cases were really here, and having my mom's story, and that's the immigrant that leads into the immigrant, the need to tell those stories, being especially in the United States and being built on immigration, but and stolen land, but that doing that, you can't put me in a situation and be like, oh my God, we're all gonna die, because I'm like, no, because people actually like, this is what can happen. So I said to myself, I'd always be an activist in some way. I'm not giving this up. And part of the music, I think, as you said it, is we're activists for musicians, and because of that, I'm really happy to do the work, even as corporate as it becomes. But we're actually turning into activists for our own positions, which is getting really scary. That's with music supervision as a craft. I think that's something that can't be ignored, and why I'm kind of upset about them still teaching it the way they do in school. And also, it's like, not everybody can music supervise. It's good to have music background. You need to have all that. But anyways, so we lose business. I'm out of JWT. Anthony Roman did Lights Out, a TV show. I went to him, and I brought him into the advertising world, and he's a phenomenal writer. And then and then Jingle House, we worked at an Avatar studio, which is a former power station that Berkeley bought. So I got to work in a studio format with a lot of session guys. My boss at the time was a session musician. And so like, knowing all of that, bringing that, and went to him and said, hey, why don't we work together in film? And he kind of is a pay your dues kind of person. So I just went for it and looked for like, I was like, God, I lost my gig. I don't know what to do. And already when I sold the Lucky Cat, I was like, what am I going to do? And I fell into the agency during that pitch. So here I am again. And then a producer who used to come into the Lucky Cat, he went to film school, NYU, then Columbia. I was going on as a line producer. I was like, can I ghost your line producer? Because Roman used to tell me, it's Anthony Roman, call him Roman, used to tell me you'd be a great line producer. And I thought that would be a good job. And I had done production and before, and so, and I did events and things like that. So he's like, oh, I've got something. And then all of a sudden we're having an interview with Mike Birbiglia, and it's Anthony and I go in. He thought we were married. So that shows you one thing about females in this role.
Yeah.
Like that one, because Anthony.
Sweet of you to bring your wife.
Yeah, here I am. Roman is married and had a kid and everything. So there's that. And in my role in that, I was one of the only females amongst, but it was Mike's first film. It was the composers, Andrew Hollader, and we're real tight, and we still talk about the experience, because being precious is something across the board. That is an interesting lesson to learn. And when you're in there experiencing and try to working through it, it's one of the hardest things, I think, a part of our job, because we have demo love, we have artists that don't want to do this, we have, brands that don't want to do things, we have it. So it's an interesting element. But so going into Sleepwalk with Me and film, that's my first film, along with oh my God. Oh, and I love this film. Because we got Reggie Watts in it. Reggie Watts has played my place, and Reggie Watts is placed in it. And it was Alan Richenbach, I can tell you, the director. He had a indie film, and his then girlfriend, now wife, was a creative at my agency who recommended me, who was on the Microsoft team. So they actually did those two films together, and that one came out way later, through the process of trying to find distribution, where Mike had Ira Glass, they had a formula, they were trying to put it out. So it was a crazy experience. First film, kind of to be there at Sundance, getting that, and then I'm like, oh God, here I am. And then what happens then, like as far as versus advertising, and how those stories get told, and then that influences the other stories. So you talked about, second part of that question was the immigrant, right?
Yeah, you have a real passion for
so telling stories. Yeah, so documentaries, not only documentary, because I've also done I worked with Nico Casavecchia with Finding Sophia. He did Battle Scar. He's from Argentina. His partner on Battle Scar is from Venezuela, lives in Spain. I worked with, it was a documentary, but with Yashira Jordan, who's one of the first women directors to show out of Bolivia, outside Bolivia. But the actor, it was like a protagonist. It was kind of having fun with the documentary, because we had somebody poking things into it. He's from Argentina, now in France, and he's done a film in German. Like he did Beats Per Minute. He was the lead, and
okay.
And he's the lead, and you tell French people from Argentina, and they're like, no, not like that. but having the Lucky Cat, I actually had a lot of these people. I had this one, Anna Cambre, who was a production designer, and she was from Argentina, who was up working. I had Valeria, who's a producer. These are the non-musicians, but also half Chilean, half Mexican, half Chilean, but in Argentina. Anna was an art director, and when I worked with Nico, not related, but I've heard of Nico because of the Argentinians, I look at the credits and there's Anna, and it's her dad who did all the art in the film. Now, these are stories, not documentaries, that one in particular. Battle Scar isn't, but they are stories with the identity of the people written into them, and maybe not so specifically in a way that we just assume. And that became a part of storytelling. And the documentary, I got lucky to work on specific documentaries, like we'll go into like Chavela, I know brought up, but right now I'm doing a biopic on Jenny Rivera. which is telling her story. And it's like, the importance of that was interesting because even with Yashira, with hers, and it was about her ex at the time finding her real dad. The music we used in finding Sophia, the music we used was not typically from Argentina or from Bolivia. It was indie music from that they enjoyed from here, from everywhere. As we know, unfortunately, everybody tries to get into the US market, right? Because we're the market you can be in. And so that influences everybody, but it's also were bands from those areas. Some music was from traditionally used, Travella for sure, because that's about her. But it's kind of seeing that and relating and knowing my mom's story and the need to tell people who we are, and it comes from any country, coming from England. I you and being able to study there, knowing those nuances is like, even Canada, it doesn't matter. And there's a real problem, which we can still see very heavily today in our politics in our current election, that that magnifies that issue. And it's really it's depressing. And I feel like growing up in California, we had a lack of understanding. Going to New York, I kind of got hit with this melting pot of like everyone, and figuring out where it all comes from, where food comes from, where the people come from, where the language is coming from, why people do things. I'm drinking PG Tips right now because
nice girl after my own
drink
heart.
coffee. I like Tesco Red Label. I don't like that people change their bags, but I'm okay with the taste. I was scared.
Oh, I love that.
It's like in knowing even language differences, like, even if we want to talk about just English alone, jumper to, trainers, a sweatshirt, hoodie to tennis shoes. Even in the US, it's sneakers to tennis shoes to whatnot, it's like, so that just with my mom, she's illiterate. She didn't know English when she came here. She didn't even know they spoke another language. And when we grew up, she wanted to assimilate. We weren't supposed to learn Spanish. Richie Valens was the same. Selena was the same. Many people are the same. Linda Ronstadt is similar background. I mean, didn't want us to know, but when you're here, you become more what you are, I believe, because you're forced into a corner like we were. You were all Mexicans. Oh, you're all gangsters. And it's like, no. I learned to throw up signs, but I was like, no, this is not who we are. And it also oppresses the people that they're doing this to. So it's like, okay, then you never get out of that. And that's why telling stories is important. And with that, it's not even nationalities, it's class. And class we don't talk about in the States as much as you do abroad in Europe. And say people believe they move up in class here by getting more money, and it's like, no, it's actually your lineage. So that's an interesting thing. And it's even class. So a poor person's path, and I'll say I'm poor. I'm welfare level growing, didn't get welfare help and wasn't on the dole, but below middle class, working class area, which is considered poor to poverty. And unfortunately that number is raising and everything. I say that in a nice way, not in a bad way, but it's blocking it's making even our job an elitist area to get into, and in many jobs to get into, and especially in the creative field. So telling stories and like integrating instead of assimilating was very important for me, because I sit there with my Mexican mother trying to assimilate, going, I don't get what this is. I don't get what that is. Even in college, somebody had explained to me what a leek was when I went to dinner. I was like, what are we eating? And it's just as small as that. And being able to say that, and and even Americans have their own, like, not born non-native generation after generation. If you get an American bro, I love these two guys on Instagram. They're Norwegian, and they go and they do different countries. I guess Sweden and them have this whole thing. But I love it because whenever they get to the American, they're like, yeah, you know, like, yeah, going to go to Starbucks or like.
Well, you do bring up a beautiful point that like, especially with the music that we put in our projects, we have a real opportunity to tell stories through music, but to tell nuance, you know, to explain nuance. I've been hired for a couple projects from people in Europe working on Latin American brands, and like I did a project for a Mexican beer brand, and they called me and they were like, we need Spanish language music. We know you live in Mexico. And I was like, great. And I was like, okay, like, what are we doing here? And like, do we need a Mexican, the artist was going to be writing music. I'm like, do we need, you know, like a Mexican accent, or are we going with like a non-denomination or like non-geographical accent, or do we want somebody Argentinian or whatever? And they were like, I didn't even know there was a difference. And so it was like perfect that they called me, you know, because, you know, of course, if we had, it's a Mexican brand, if we had put an Argentinian accent in there, would have like, could have really just
offended a lot.
You know, it's like, and I think that music can't lie in a lot of ways. It's like when brands, especially in the advertising world, when brands are trying too hard, it's real obvious. Or when brands are not, you know, connected or tapped in, and that nuance is missing or off the mark or trying too hard, it's like, it's very obvious. And so that's a really beautiful thing about what we do, and something that's hard to teach, I think.
Yeah, no, and I mean, like, Georgia, your experience is unlike any other. And if you say funk and somebody says, oh, San Francisco, that ain't gonna be Georgia. And
Yeah.
everything. And then you have like all those sounds that are specifically Atlanta, you know, that if you say the South, even you have a whole genre of influence.
Yeah.
That becomes part of our expertise and what we know. And you get it northern to southern England. I mean, Irish and Scotland. It's just like if you did that and everything, and the thing is the monolithic approach to things across all is just like, I mean, I can imagine like a Geordie accent somewhere, and you know,
yeah.
And I watch our friends in the north, and I always, you know, that was my exposure. Like, you're gonna learn this, you know, and I was just like, okay, and that was dialed down. But I think it's England more that got me into the atmosphere of, you know, having those friends that got me into understanding class a bit more and understanding where I was from. Because
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's just like, and then it was almost like an affiliation, like, oh, okay. Unfortunately, I think education's better in England, even at all levels of school, than here. And now they're trying to ban more stuff and limit. But now that I speak to more people in other states and what they learn compared to what I learned, I was like, well, I'm like, wow, that's scary. And it doesn't become universal till college, and even college can become divided because you can have religious colleges, you can have you know, different influences. So it's like, it's just but I, you know, learning public school boys and learning, I mean, I had to learn with the Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, you know, I knew exactly where the weed dealers were, you know, and they're like, when they say public school boy, I'm like, haha, I know what that means, you know, and I was like, I know what that means for us. It was cool to have that, because it's not something my mom's going to tell me, because she's not going to that, you know, and they want the American dream. It's like, okay, well, that's not really feasible.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never heard that explained like that before. That, you know, I guess because where I'm in the UK, it's just normalized for me to have like class discussions and things, and that obviously that exists and it's just openly spoken about, but that it's not as much in the States.
And it's something
we just talk about it in different ways. We don't talk about class, but we talk about class without talking about class.
Yeah, in roundabout ways.
Kind of do, but that's a big part of the political platform right now. That's being on and how they're.
So just going back a little bit about the brands, like how do you both see the future of storytelling, mixing music with brands moving, obviously because we've got the use of AI now and things like that. How do you see that moving forwards, like in the future?
You want to go first, Sam?
Yeah, sure.
Right?
It mirrors other areas of our society, but I will say that I think that where I see it going at the moment is kind of a real division. It's either these big, artist partnerships with the hottest talent, multi-million dollar deals, like, led by the brand. They have 3 agencies, and 40 people working on it, and it's going to be they're putting all their money into it. We've seen these types of artist partnership type things, or and then on the other end, stock music, AI generated music, or even sync agencies and independent music, but that because people are hungry, because there's a lot of people trying to sell music into the advertising industry now, and there's going to be this just really cheap and tactical kind of end of other side of music, and that's more of the music that's actually going in commercials and audiovisual pieces. For me, I was super excited about the whole, and still am, the whole world in between. There's so much incredible talent out there, and it's easy to find, to search for, to create and make and produce high quality, really just amazing music. And I think brands could get a really good, return on their investment and pay artists well, and also have really kick-ass music that helps move their brands towards their objectives. And it doesn't have to be at either end of the spectrum, but I think it's gonna rely on how prominent we music supervisors can be. Honestly, it's like what we're able to create in as our craft and our profession, and if we're getting into those conversations and actually working on each of these projects and having the time and communication and money and everything else that we need, like it's just putting a little bit of attention on the industry, or on music as a major asset for their brands. But where I've been seeing it lately is just really kind of going to the polar ends, and I put a lot of that on the music industry, on us, like it's our responsibility to like educate and teach and bring resources and present music, and have brands be more connected to what music options are out there for them, and to value music. I have music supervisors or sync agencies and stuff coming to me and asking me for Latin music for, I had this recently, like a US project. It was like 1 year, all media, a major US brand, and they told me they had $3,000 for it. And it's like, that should be a $30,000 project, at least minimum. And I was just like, and they were like, I know it's low. And I'm like, dude, you shouldn't even be doing that. Like they were going to put it on broadcast television for a year, and it was just like, anyway, so it's like, it's up to us to just say no, or change it, or educate, or, or whatever, create the value there. So that's what I see. And I'd like to say that we're organizing ourselves. We're having conversations like this, I think we're getting out there more. So like there is a beautiful opportunity for us there's a lot of opportunity, let's say that. And we'll see.
Lila, do you have anything to add to it as well?
Yes, I think you're on the right path with about budgeting. Well, the digital space has affected everyone across the board. Right now, we know that Hollywood is is really suffering. It's a great union busting tactic, but the studios have become so corporate that their way of understanding creativity is kind of more what we see in the commercial world. In advertising, at least there's there's people that can protect themselves because there's an integrity on winning business, but we're seeing big agencies fall, and a lot of it kind of has to do to budget. A lot of the signatories, which are union signatories in the States, are deflating, and boutique agencies are coming up because they're doing things for less now. And what does that mean? Why is it less? And it's less maybe because it's more digital work where everybody tried to ignore it before, like as mentioned. And then the budgets just get shrunken down, and music is always the ones that are affected. And it's less of us as advocates, and that's something that's harder because music supervisors on a whole in advertising are becoming more freelance, and we're the first ones that kind of are let go. And then in the film world, I'm on the unionizing committee, which is kind of a non-unionizing committee because we went up against Netflix, and I'm in advertising with a film arm, and it's mostly studio work in Hollywood that was dealing with this with IATSE. But being in New York, I was in New York, we had someone in Chicago. That discussion and getting involved in what happened with the writer strike and with the SAG actor strike here, and with digital, they were basically dealing with the same issues that are impacting our world, and it's impacting us on the film, and it's impacting us on the advertising side, and that has to do with streaming and with digital and how it's perceived and how it's taking over and usurped, and really the value of it. And then there's no advocates for it. So music, even though there's legislation now that will set prices that Spotify uses as an example, there's legislation about downloads. And initially, Spotify did not come in the United States because of certain legislation that we had. But now that it's becoming an overwhelming problem across all fields, you have all these groups that are somewhat lobbying for their individual crafts, but music seems to be lacking that. And sometimes you see some big hits, like when Universal hit TikTok and took all the music down. But one thing I saw, like on Instagram, for instance, I don't know what happened there, but one of our stuff got muted when I used the library for our unionizing efforts, for instance, and they stripped the music and our voiceover, which was an actor voiceover. So that was actually our copyright, but I'm sure there's an Instagram guideline that says that they can, when they take the audio, it's married, it's theirs, or they have control. But that was our copyright that we got, and I can't necessarily replace it, and did everything by the book.
Yeah, and there's got, I
Yeah.
mean, you gotta really think like what's wrong with our, like what's the conversation when a job, let's just say, because being a musician obviously is a job, when a job is that we have to pass legislation to put a floor for what you have to pay
Yeah.
musicians for the work that they're already doing. I mean, we are having to pass laws in order to make sure that artists get paid. What other profession would you go into where I mean, of course we have a minimum wage, but these are like, like there's very few professions where you go in and they're just like, I'm going to pay you as little as I possibly can,
It's true.
And they're saying there, you guys talked about writers' rights before, and you not wanting to give up your rights, but you were going to keep a certain writer share, right? So that didn't happen until Motown screwed everybody. And then there was a law passed to say, okay, you can't take away a writer's rights. Like they have to have 50%, right? So, and then there were still the buyouts that were starting to happen. And then that's happening in film scores with composers, with GPS, and composers are getting bought out, and their back end was getting bought out. And they would get a writer's share, but they would lose a lot. And a lot of that was part of their negotiation for indie films. So indie films would say, hey, okay, fine, you write, we only pay you this, but you get to keep your rights. We have this master, but you can re-record, blah, 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 right? Okay, fine. So I have assets now. okay, that film, that indie film gets picked up by the digital people, and the digital people go, sorry, our studio, we keep everything. And that happened to me with the Weinstein, when before he, want him to go down even further, but before, because the case got overturned. But what happened with Weinstein, and my agent, my composer I was working with, we have the same agent, said, you guys are off the project. We were almost done. And he goes, you're off the project, because they said they wanted all of that. And the director got upset, because she worked with this composer and was like, wait a second. And the agent turned around and said, sorry, you got to learn to pay your composer more, so that when this happens. But so that fell on the indie person. Like, why does that, you know what I'm saying? And that, so, okay, so then we had these, and it was a documentary. So we had these indie filmmakers where it falls on them, and like getting rights now for them, for instance, like getting, if you go to a major, they're very reluctant to give you anything past festival. So you're like, but wait, what happens after festival? And sometimes it's just approval. We'll approve. And they're like, oh no, I know this musician, I know this artist is trouble. So how did you approve within it? So it's a straight fee. We approved, no problem. Okay. But you get to the full up and you have distribution and you need it, and you can't use that song anymore. So that indie filmmaker has to come in, a film they live with, I don't know, for a year, and they have to reopen the mix, pay for that, pay for the producer to do that. If not, it's the director doing everything anyways. And that is because they saw their money deflate due to a system that changed significantly, that went from box office sales to movies to the digital space, which these rights are being fought for in divisions. So you got the writers and you got SAG, and they have unions. You music supervisors don't have a union. They deemed us independent contractors when we went up against the labor board in California. And it's a whole thing here, the processing and how you do it. And they did it because we create our own businesses. We can work on multiple projects, but we're like, wait, we got to do that to survive.
Yeah.
And actors do that, and editors do that. You want to talk about the millionaire who gets yachts off their taxes? Well, guess what? We should get the benefit from that same corporate structure. Even though I don't have a yacht, I have like maybe one for the bathtub, maybe. But it's like, I don't. But that'd be kind of funny. Like so. But it's just like how's the labor board behind in the idea of what a freelancer is, and what a freelancer has to do in this world, really, because it's a gig economy that we're turning into to survive. How did that work against us, and how do we change that? And we're not the only ones. Whoever goes up against with those folks, because it's a step formula, they'll be screwed. So where's our lobbying network that's in DC, because it has to go there before it flies everywhere else? And and every country has a similar system, right? And how they do unions and stuff like that. It comes from, most of our laws come from the European systems anyway. So as far as property and that, right, and those rights. So that structure, seeing digital just come in, and nobody, I mean, even with advertising. So when digital came in, we had SAG, who had rates for TV, rates for radio. After and SAG joined together, they start regulating it. But then digital space, what did we do? Oh, that was left for negotiation. And then they went, oh shit, we're in trouble. Our actors are losing money, because what they were doing, and I saw this happening in our agency, they were putting stuff on the digital space first before it went to TV, so that your SAG pickup, your actors pickup, so you get it for the time, just like musicians. You get it for the session, right? The day you act, the day you record, the day you go to voiceover, whatever. And then you get it to when it airs. And that it becomes a cycle. So that's residuals, right? So you get it too with musicians, you get it as well, with depending on what they do. And musicians and advertising, if you're a singer, you get it actually off-camera voiceover. You can become part of the Actors Guild as a union. So you see that. So they put it on digital, and then the pickup for TV is a lot less.
Right.
So they found a way to manipulate the system, and then they came back and they said, oh, okay. And they negotiated the advertising rates, I think 2 years 3 years ago because of strike, 2 years before last year. And now here comes the actors and the writers, right, with theirs against Hollywood. And as we saw,
Yeah, sorry, I'm just noticing. Do we have other people who are waiting?
Yes.
How are we doing this next session? Part of the session. Sorry, I think we were supposed to finish.
No, good call. But anyways, digital space and knowing our budgets and knowing what to do and what you can do for your budget, that's really where it comes down to. Like, it's
Absolutely.
like, we need more advocacy and more unification. So these discussions help.
100%. So just to wrap it up here, thank you so much for your insights. It's been really, really informative. I've learned a lot. The members will as well. Really, really appreciate both of your time. We do now have a live pitch session. Did Linda give you all the details for that?
Gave us the music.
She did, yeah. I need to pull it up.
Okay, great. So if we can come out of this session, just so I can keep the podcast separate from the live pitch so that it doesn't, upload to the clouds like together. Otherwise it's just like one full long.
Yeah, is it the same link?
Exactly the same. Yeah. Okay, cool. So if I'm just going to stop. Actually, no, I could just stop this recording and then press